Não me deixe com fome.
¿Qué?
Não bom quando eu fome.
That's the line everybody remembers. The green guy, the smashing, the punchline that turned into 1,000 memes. And here's the thing nobody tells you. The man who said that line hated this version of the movie. He hated it so much that he quietly took control of a $150 million machine, rewrote it from page 1, and tried to turn the Hulk into something closer to Schindler's List than a Saturday cartoon. And the studio decided that made him a problem. There's a moment that happens on certain film sets that never makes the behind-the-scenes featurette. It's the second. The director realizes the most powerful person on set isn't him. It's the guy in the actor's chair, who has quietly decided the movie they're shooting is the wrong movie, and that he's going to fix it whether anyone asked or not. We call that ego. Sometimes it is. But every single time I dig into one of these stories, the line between ego and the only person in the room who actually cared turns out to be a lot thinner than the headlines want. Tonight, I'm walking you through 3 of the most notorious actor versus director collisions ever, and I'm going to flip each one on you halfway through, because none of them mean what you think. The third one is going to leave a mark. So back to that man in the broken Portuguese. Edward Norton is the actor other actors are quietly scared of. Not because he's loud, because he's right too often. Long before Marvel called, the stories already followed him. On American History X, the legend goes, he basically wrestled the edit out of director Tony Kaye's hands, recutting it until Kaye tried to scrub his own name off the thing. So when Marvel handed Norton The Incredible Hulk in 2007, they knew exactly what they were buying. They just didn't believe it would happen to them. Here's what actually went down. Marvel had a script by Zach Penn, clean, comic booky, safe. Norton sat down with director Louis Leterrier and basically said, "I'll do it, but I'm rewriting this." Marvel agreed to bring in a screenwriter to work with him. That writer never got hired. So with about 2 months before cameras rolled, Norton sat down and did a full page 1 rewrite of a major studio tentpole by himself. And the way he chose to open his version tells you everything. Picture it. Before any monster, before any action, Bruce Banner, alone in the frozen Arctic, putting a gun in his own mouth, trying to end it. And the Hulk won't let him die. The creature spits the bullet out. A man so cursed by what he becomes that suicide isn't even available to him anymore. That's the movie Norton was making. Not a smash fest, a horror film about a man trapped inside his own body. So you're already nodding, thinking, okay, that sounds incredible. Where's the ego? And that's the head fake. Because the real war never started in the writing. It started in the editing room, which is the only place a movie is actually decided. Norton and Leterrier turned in a long, brooding, character-first cut. Marvel grabbed roughly 23 minutes of it, including that Arctic suicide opening, and dumped it in the bin. Their logic was blunt. It's called The Incredible Hulk. People want the Hulk. Get him on screen fast. Lose the sad stuff. Norton snapped. He started rewriting scenes daily, fighting for material that was already shot and already cut, pushing for control over the final edit the way he'd done before. And Marvel, a baby studio at the time, terrified of looking soft right after Iron Man, pushed back harder. Kevin Feige later wrapped the breakup in perfect PR. Norton wasn't fired over money. They just needed someone who fit the collaborative spirit of the cast. Translation, too much trouble. They recast Mark Ruffalo and never looked back. End of story, right? Difficult perfectionist torpedoes his own franchise over a power trip. Except go watch what Marvel became. Every great Marvel movie since is the one with the wounded, human center Norton was screaming for. And here's the detail that seals it. Years later, Leterrier himself, the director Norton supposedly steamrolled, sat down and said on camera that Norton was right to fight for that serious tone. The man on the other side of the war took his side. The WGA never even gave Norton a writing credit. He fought a corporation for the soul of a movie, lost, got branded a diva, and was correct the entire time. Asked about all of it later at a public roast, his whole defense was 4 words: "I wanted a better script." Being right too early is the cruelest kind of right there is, and it's nothing compared to the man who actually pushed a director to the edge of a breakdown. Francis Ford Coppola had already made The Godfather. Twice, he was untouchable. And in 1976, he dragged a film crew into the Philippine jungle to make a Vietnam epic, and the man he hired to anchor the whole thing nearly broke him in half. Marlon Brando was getting $3 million for 3 weeks of work, $1 million handed over before he even showed up. Coppola had a crystal clear picture of Colonel Kurtz, a soldier wasted away by the jungle, gaunt, hollow, a ghost of a man. The script called for him fit and commanding, and then Brando arrived. He was enormous. Reports run anywhere from 210 pounds to nearly 300, and one producer's reaction became legend. You couldn't see around him. Every costume already built was useless. He couldn't remember his lines, and in the version Coppola told for years, Brando hadn't even bothered to read Heart of Darkness, the entire novel the film is built on. Coppola had a war zone collapsing on top of him. A typhoon had already flattened his sets. Martin Sheen was about to have a near-fatal heart attack. Dennis Hopper was so wired that he and Brando nearly came to blows, and now his climax was a man who didn't know his lines, didn't fit the role, and flat out refused to play it as written. Coppola has admitted he genuinely thought about ending it all out there. The whole production smelled like a career funeral. And right here's where I'm supposed to tell you Brando saved it. Before I flip it though, quick thing. If you've ever watched a troubled production story and felt that little electric buzz of watching brilliant people lose control, do me a favor and subscribe, because this entire channel is built on that exact feeling, and I've got a stack of these lined up. Okay, back into the jungle. Here's the flip, and it's a big one. That he never read the book story? Brando's personal library held multiple annotated editions of Heart of Darkness. He'd read it deeply. What he'd actually decided was that Coppola's interpretation of Kurtz was wrong, and he wasn't going to fake his way through a version he didn't believe in. So the two of them did something insane for a production bleeding money by the hour. They stopped, shut the cameras down, and sat in a room together for hours, day after day, arguing about who this man really was. Coppola wanted him to shave his head and stick to the book. Brando resisted, said he'd sleep on it, and walked in the next morning with a freshly shaved head, announcing he'd read it and now agreed. The weight problem? Coppola turned it into the most famous lighting decision in modern film. He and cinematographer Vittorio Storaro buried Brando in shadow, dressed him in black, let half his face vanish into the dark so all you feel is the voice and the dread.
Call me a murderer. You have a right to kill me.
The thing that was supposed to ruin the movie became the thing that makes Kurtz feel less like a man and more like something the jungle grew. And those monologues,
0500 hours, Sector King, Zulu King.
the rambling, hypnotic ones everyone quotes, Brando largely improvised them, talking for hours while the camera ran, with Coppola fishing the gold out of the river afterward. Brando said it himself, plainly, years later. I rewrote the entire script, and I have it all on tape. So which is it? The bloated diva who almost killed the production, or the genius who reinvented the most important character in the film off the top of his head? The honest answer is both, in the same body, at the same time. Brando didn't respect Coppola's vision, he replaced it, and the replacement became one of the greatest performances ever put on screen. You can survive that kind of collision when the actor's a genius and the director is Coppola. But what happens when an actor that powerful lands on a director who isn't bulletproof yet? When the talent and the ego are both pointed in the wrong direction at once? That's where it stops being fun. His name was Richard Stanley, and The Island of Dr. Moreau was supposed to be the movie that made him. Stanley wasn't a studio hack. He was a young South African filmmaker, fresh off a cult hit called Hardware, and he'd spent roughly 4 years of his life, 4 years, developing this adaptation. He wrote the screenplay. He'd been obsessed with H.G. Wells's Mad Scientist and his island of half-human creatures since he was a kid. New Line Cinema handed him a real budget and the keys to his dream. This was the shot most directors wait an entire career for. Then they cast Val Kilmer. In the mid-90s, Kilmer was as hot as it got. Iceman in Top Gun. Jim Morrison in The Doors. He'd just been Batman, a genuine movie star with all the leverage that comes with it. And by every account from that set, he showed up ready to burn the place down. Part of it was personal. He was being served divorce papers while shooting, which would put anyone in a black mood. But what followed wasn't the behavior of a man having a rough week. He fought the director on everything. He refused to say lines as written. and demanded his time on camera be slashed by nearly half. In the accounts that survived from the crew, he burned people with lit cigarettes. He'd vanish into his trailer and leave a whole crew waiting for hours. There's a story that once, with the cameras rolling and everyone in position, he just sat down on the ground and wouldn't get back up. He treated the man who'd given 4 years of his life to this story like an obstacle in the way. And Stanley, young, in over his head on a production this size, with an actual hurricane tearing through the location and a studio losing its nerve, couldn't hold it together. He had a breakdown. New Line fired him. Just a few days into principal photography, the man who'd dreamed this whole thing into existence was thrown off his own set and replaced by a hardened veteran, John Frankenheimer, who was old school enough to bark both Kilmer and Brando into line. So far above all of it, that when Kilmer tried to make small talk and asked if he'd seen the local reef, Brando reportedly just told him he owned one and didn't speak to him again for the rest of the shoot. And Frankenheimer, he was a hard ass who'd already survived Brando once, and even he came off that island saying there were only 2 things he'd never do in his life: climb Mount Everest and work with Val Kilmer again. He swore he wouldn't put that prick in a movie, even if it were called The Life of Val Kilmer. Now here's the detail that turns this from sad into legend. After he got fired, Stanley didn't fly home. He vanished into the Australian wilderness. The studio was genuinely afraid he'd come back and torch the set. And then, and this is confirmed in the documentary Lost Soul, which you need to watch the second you finish this, Stanley snuck back onto the production he'd been fired from, in full creature makeup, as an extra. He spent days on his own movie, in costume as one of the dog-faced beastmen, silently watching strangers wreck the thing he'd built, unrecognized, a ghost haunting his own film. This is where the flips on the first 2 stories run out of road. Brando's ego built a masterpiece. Norton's ego was just correctness arriving too early. But Kilmer's ego on that island didn't create anything. It buried something. Dr. Moreau came out, got savaged as one of the worst films of its decade, and Richard Stanley's mainstream career, the thing he'd chased for 4 years, was finished before it started. He didn't direct another feature for more than 20 years. That's the version we don't like to sit with. Sometimes the difficult actor isn't a misunderstood artist. Sometimes he just wins, and a quieter, more fragile vision dies underneath him, and nobody makes a triumphant documentary about the masterpiece that came out of it. Because there is no masterpiece. There's a wreck, and a man in a dog costume who lost everything. And then there's the part of Kilmer's story I can't tell you without it changing how the whole thing feels. For years, Val Kilmer was the cautionary tale. Joel Schumacher, who directed him on Batman Forever, said in public he never wanted to work with the man again. The phone stopped ringing. The most talented actor of his generation kept wrecking the relationships that talent built him, and one by one, the offers stopped coming. And then in 2014, the universe decided to take the one thing he'd weaponized against everyone. Kilmer was diagnosed with throat cancer. The treatment that saved his life, a tracheostomy, chemo, radiation, took his voice. The instrument he'd used to dominate every set he ever walked onto. The voice that intimidated directors and steamrolled co-stars was reduced to a whisper through a hole in his throat. To bring him back for Top Gun Maverick, they had to rebuild his voice with artificial intelligence because the real one was gone. He wrote about it in his memoir, and the line stops you cold. He said that when he speaks now, he sounds like Marlon Brando after a couple bottles of tequila. He knew exactly whose company he was in. He beat the cancer, declared himself clear by 2021, but the body never fully came back. On April 1st, 2025, Val Kilmer died of pneumonia at 65, his system worn down by everything the years had taken out of him. In his own documentary, Val, he finally got to tell his side of the island, quietly, in a voice that was barely there anymore. And here's the thing that complicates the whole monster story. David Thewlis, the actor trapped opposite Kilmer for 5 brutal months on that island, remembered it as the most bizarre stretch of his entire life. Something so spectacularly bleak and awful, it almost circled back around to wonderful. The 2 of them stayed close for the rest of Kilmer's life. In one of his last messages, Kilmer wrote to Thewlis about what an incredible story the 2 of them had lived together. The most difficult man in the room was also, to the people who actually stuck it out beside him, impossible to forget. So here's the lesson I keep landing on, and it isn't a clean one. Ego was the same fuel in all 3 of these men. The refusal to be small, the flat certainty that they saw the thing more clearly than the people signing the checks. The difference was never the size of it. It was where they pointed it. Brando aimed his at the work and made it immortal. Norton aimed his at the work and got buried for being early. Kilmer on that island aimed his at a person, and when you point your ego at a person instead of the work doesn't survive it. Eventually, neither do you. He spent decades being the most difficult man in any room. And the quietest, cruelest twist in any of these stories is that by the time almost everything else was gone, the one thing he'd always had, that voice, got taken too. It left him with nothing to be difficult with. 3 actors, 3 directors, 3 visions hijacked. One gave us a masterpiece, one gave us a man who was right too soon, and one gave us a warning. Drop a comment and tell me which one you think was actually justified, because I genuinely change my mind on Norton every single time I think about it. See you next week.